Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, sitting down for my review of Wolong Fallen Dynasty. A big thanks to Xbox and Koei Tecmo for the review code a couple of weeks, yes plural, weeks ahead of launch. When Xbox stepped into my inbox and went, hey, you want a Wolong code? I checked my watch and I went, it's the middle of February, what do you mean? Of course I do. So I've had a lot of time to play this one through, think about my experience, and I'm here to deliver my thoughts to you all today. The too long didn't read is Wolong Fallen Dynasty is fantastic for the most part. It does have a bit of Nioh 1 energy. We're going to get into Team Ninja's history a bit in this video because the Nioh franchise I find fantastic. With the first iteration, I love significantly less compared to the second iteration, and I find that Wolong Fallen Dynasty, while much better than Nioh 1, will be walking that similar path if it does earn itself a sequel, as there are some hang-ups, much like Nioh 1 had some hang-ups in adopting the Souls-like franchise. This is the first time we're seeing a true Sekiro-style competitor. And because of that, there are some moments that Wolong will trip up and get things wrong, but for the most part, it's spectacular, it's satisfying, and it's fun. So ladies and gentlemen, before we dive deep into this Souls-like experience, if you are new here and you are into day one reviews, you're in the right place. Consider subscribing. Before I dive into the gameplay and the rule set of this game, I do want to address some technical concerns I personally have for my friends over on Xbox, as this game is available for $60 elsewhere, but you can get it day one on Game Pass. There were some concerns exiting the alpha for Wolong Fallen Dynasty toward the latter part of 2022, where the Xbox version did not function that well compared to PlayStation. And so now I can confirm there were some tech issues on the Xbox version of Wolong Fallen Dynasty. These are things like cutscenes having random hitches, hiccups, all over the place. And quite honestly, I reinstalled my game, I restarted my app at certain points. Nothing seemed to solve this, so I have to just drum it up to a tech issue somewhere. I found this one particularly frustrating because the cutscenes in this game are raw, they're fire, and honestly, I couldn't enjoy them as much as I wanted to. Otherwise, there are the occasional frame dips, like in very busy boss fights where there are huge creatures with lots of particle effects ongoing. When it gets very busy, which is often, you may notice a slight dip here. But perhaps the one that stood out to me the most was the pop-in. I mean, there were some points in the levels where I would step into an area loading in before my eyes, some worse than others, but it's just a couple of things that I want Xbox fans to be wary of in case you were worried about the alpha for Wolong, that some of those technical woes did continue into this full release here today. So just keep an eye out for other reviewers bringing that stuff up. I want to put it at the forefront here. Now let's get into the Souls-like experience, because what really these games all live and die on are their rule sets. What can you do and what can't you do? So Wolong Fallen Dynasty really hedges its bets on being a lot like Sekiro, a focus on deflecting. But how you get there with its RPG mechanics is quite interesting. So it starts off with the morale rank. It's this little number here at the bottom middle of the screen. You'll be able to raise your morale by conquering foes and planting flags all over set mission maps. Now the morale will affect your strength in battle as well as the enemies. So for example, if you're a rank 1 in morale, you probably don't want to take on that enemy with a rank 10 in morale. You can beat them, but they will hit you extremely hard. Now every zone starts at a morale rank of 0 as you climb your way up the morale rank ladder. And you're gonna, as I mentioned earlier, plant flags all over maps to increase your fortitude. Think of this as your floor for when you die and you lose your morale. The problem is that some of these flags are tough to find. So we're gonna make a lot of references to Nioh 1 and 2 in this review. If you play Nioh, you know the collectibles, you know those green little kodamas? Imagine if those kodamas were semi-required collectibles that you overall needed to get the maximum amount of power out of your character per mission. I was deeply into the exploration here, but sometimes when I couldn't find that one last marking flag, it drove me up a wall because there's very little indications on where it may be. So I found myself doubling back to certain maps, just digging everywhere to try and find it, and in some instances could not find it. I think that this is where, again, the design slips up a bit. I like the morale fortitude system overall. I think it generally works, but these are the moments where those hangups stink. Now, unlike our aforementioned Kodama from Nioh 2, I find the flags in Wolong to be semi-required. Can you go and challenge the boss that's usually at morale rank 20 and face them at morale rank 10? Yes, you can. Will you do damage like you have a butter knife and they hit you like a freight train? Absolutely. It's going to be in your best interest every mission to find all of these flags. Now, I know some sweat will step into the comments and say, well, actually, but no, the game's design inherently encourages you to find these flags. It is absolutely in your best interest. And when you feel like you need to do that and you can't find them, it does start to irritate a little bit. Where the morale system thrives is, for example, there will be enemies that attack you where they're surrounded with a red aura. These are attacks you cannot block and you must deflect, and you get the most satisfying sound effect and animation combo that we've seen in a long while. The problem is when you get hit by that red attack, it will knock your morale rank down. So there's a real tug of war throughout every level where if you screw up a number of times, even if your fortitude is say 13, but you've been hit by 5 of those various red attacks, we'll call them, it'll knock your current morale down to 8 until you either work your way back up or you die and respawn, and it raises your rank of your morale to your fortitude. Does that sound a bit over-designed to you? It's because it kind of is. At a certain point in this game, with all of its RPG systems that I have yet to get into, I couldn't help but wonder if Wo Long was trying to do a little too much and not just rest on the fact that it has really good, satisfying mechanics. You could compare them to Sekiro, and I think that'd be totally fine. The name of the game here is deflecting and knocking down the spirit gauge, aka the stamina in this game. The way you gain spirit is by landing basic attacks. Once you build that up, you'll see the blue start to fill a little bar at the bottom of the screen, and if you press Y or triangle, it's going to unleash a spirit attack, which will attack the enemy's spirit gauge as well. Eventually, once that fills up, they're going to be open to what's called a fatal strike, which is that epic cinematic attack I was telling you about earlier. All of this works really well together. Sometimes I couldn't help but wonder if the morale system just got in the way, because Wo Long's also an RPG, and when you look at Sekiro, which isn't that for the most part, then you start to see why maybe Sekiro went one way in its design and what happens with Wo Long when you go the other way. The difference here, though, I think, is that you can really attack an enemy's health bar depending on your build. That's something I liked here. It wasn't mandatory for you to say maximize morale. It was just the most efficient thing here. It wasn't mandatory for the most part for me to attack your common enemy and assault their spirit gauge. I could just attack their health bar if I was careful and wanted to whittle them down that way and not focus too much on deflecting, but more on blocking. This game does offer you more flexibility, not only in the terms of approach, but it also offers a diversity of weapons. You're not just stuck with one sword. You can use a spear, dual swords. You can use so many different combinations. It is absolutely fun in that department. So as you kill enemies, you're going to get the equivalent of souls in this game, and you're going to spend these souls, if you will, in 5 different areas. Now, as you level these up, don't worry, you can respec if you want to go left and try a different type of build for your character. And yes, loot is still very much a thing here, much like it is in Neo. You'll be sifting through tons of it, salvaging most of it, and then respecing the rest of it. You can go to a shop and upgrade it too, as well as change the effects of each piece of equipment here. So that is where Neo steps in. You start to see the loot-driven nature of Neo really invading this game. And I like that it's an RPG. One of the reasons, fun fact, that I bounced off of Sekiro after the Genichiro fight, I didn't like that there weren't RPG mechanics. It's something I really, really love about FromSoft games. I feel they make builds count. And while they did an amazing job with Sekiro, I just realized that those mechanics are kind of what pull me in, because it feels like it's the result of my build or my retooling at certain points in the game that wins me those battles. So that's where some of the satisfaction is born beyond the rhythmic deflecting of Sekiro. Not that it's a bad game, but that's just where I stand. So Wo Long is more my type of Sekiro, that focus on character building, because as you put points into these 5 respective stats, you'll start to unlock new wizardry spells. I personally like the diversity of spells offered here, because when you look at something like Neo 2's skill tree, is it bigger? Yes, but I think the one that Wo Long offers here is much deeper. It allows you to create your own personally tailored build that works to exactly what you want to accomplish. When you add in on top of that some of the loot having more diversity, such as specific martial arts, which are these physical skills that you can use that are attached to each weapon, some attacking the spirit gauge, some attacking the health bar, and some having very special effects in general, makes it really exciting to tweak your build. When you combine that with Sekiro mechanics, you're just speaking my language, quite frankly. There are co-op focused spells like being able to gain health with every attack landed, to more self-protecting spells like increasing your defense or adding fire to one of your weapons. There are just so many ways to go about this game, and when you combine that with some really satisfying deflecting, I mean, it can be one of the best gaming experiences you've had in the last couple of years. Given that Wolong is an RPG, this does mean to some extent here, you still have to know the mechanics of the boss and be able to deflect at key moments. You can power level by farming old missions to some extent, even though the content here is thinner, and you could come back later at a higher level and do more damage, because there were bosses that I was having trouble with, but I realized, oh, it's actually more of a gear issue here. It can be tough to identify your problem. You wonder, is it a morale issue? Is it a gear issue? Is it a stats issue? Is it a weapon issue? I don't know anymore. And that's where, again, I say it can be a little over-designed, but I love the complexity of it so much that I'm not really gonna hit it hard for it. Plus, I think this game is a little bit more accessible for beginners. Now, don't get me wrong, the opening boss fight in this game is going to kill you if you are not an absolute god. Like, I didn't die much in Wolong, to tell you the truth, but this opening boss kicked my ass all over the place. And it wasn't until afterwards that I finally mastered the mechanics, because this game and all these Souls-likes are about teaching lessons. So I learned there, okay, I gotta have my deflect game on point. And once I learned that lesson, I was much better from that point moving forward. So it felt good to be better at the game and not be dying as much. But part of that is also because you can call in reinforcements. Most of the time, it's automatically done for you. As you're going through missions, you'll always have a friend or two with you. And yes, sometimes they'll draw aggro. And you're going to want to have them around, because at Oath level 5, when you're keeping these companions around, their performance in combat will improve. So they'll be, you know, less stupid and they'll do more damage. That's great. But then at level 10, they'll actually give you their equipment. So it's encouraged to hang on to them. Now, there are certain levels that let you go off on your own, which I preferred because they were more difficult. And yes, sometimes I felt, and this may sound a bit try hard sweaty, I apologize. Sometimes I found this game a little too easy, a little too forgiving. And I wasn't totally in love with that. But it's not lost on me that that's really important. That's something a lot of folks are looking for. And here you can play after the first mission co-op. You literally beat that first boss on your own, which teaches you how to deflect pretty much. Once you've got that, you're going to be a good co-op partner. You'll be good to go. It took me about an hour to get through that first mission. From there, everything is up to 3-player co-op. Absolutely awesome here. And so there's a reason why they built the game this way, and it's because most missions are structured with co-op in mind. And if you don't have a friend, they're allowing you to still summon reinforcements for some of these missions, and if not, automatically giving them to you. It's also guided in the item description department a little bit better. One of my big critiques of what goes on in the Souls-like games is that sometimes I think they abandon just explaining sensible things to you out of fear of telling you too much. I like the lack of hand-holding in a Souls-like, but I gotta say that sometimes y'all just gotta tell me what an item does. Like, you don't have to make it this complex story that I find out. I just tell me what it does. Does it heal me, increase my stats? This game does that. I know Souls-like games have gotten better at that, but I like that we've sort of dropped this idea of not knowing what an item does, because why not? I think we can at least tell us that much. Much like Nioh, you're going to have a map where you can access main and sub stories. Unlike Nioh, you're not actually chucked into this screen after every single mission. I actually put about 5 hours into this game before I discovered this feature at all. At first, I thought it wasn't even in the game, which is a good sign because it does give the game a better pace. I didn't care at all at first that this was missing. I was happy to discover it because I went, oh wow, great, more Wolong. Like, I'm all about that. And much like Nioh, these Wolong submissions are going to be doubling back into the same mission map and pretty much doing that mission backwards with a different objective in there. It's just them reusing assets, allows you to farm some more materials, allows you to fight different bosses at times, and some of those bosses are great, like 1-on-2 boss fights that really show the strength of the mechanics. But 1-on-3, oh, that's when we're pushing it and we start to get in some pretty hit or miss boss design that I do want to hit on. So remember what I said at the start of the review, Nioh 1 energy. Nioh 1 had a lot of good components to it, but some of its missing parts to me were, again, the bosses, but also like making William the main character I thought was really weird. It just screamed that it needed creative character. So why do we make it just one generic dude? I don't understand. But in the second game, they came around and they answered all of our dreams. And that's why, to me, Nioh 2 is arguably my favorite Souls-like game. I think it's fantastic. So with Wolong Fallen Dynasty, it reminds me a bit of Nioh in that typically when they are human bosses with weapons that challenge your ability to deflect and they do sequential attacks and they have great mechanics attached to them, that is when this game is absolute fire. Some bosses are just unimaginative, big creatures that are showpieces more than challenges, and I'll beat them kind of with a yawn. And I didn't like that at all. I understand accessibility seems to be a focus here, and I think you can have that. But what was cool about Wo Long for so many of its fights and levels was that it managed to be interesting and difficult, but it didn't feel like unfathomable. Like when I got to a certain boss, which I won't talk too much about, but when I got to a certain boss in this game and thought, wow, like this is so tough, but I'm loving how fair of a challenge it is, that's where you know they're just starting to master this Souls-like genre truly. But it hurts so bad when they go back to Neo 1 energy and you just get a whack creature afterwards that's not fun to fight at all. So that's really it for the gameplay. It's heavily invested in its RPG mechanics. I think it mostly works. I think it stumbles a bit in its boss design. Its levels are solid, if not at times a little unimaginative. I thought that some of them could have been prettied up a little bit, which I'm usually not that type of guy. But when I started to feel that energy from me, I went, okay, something must be deeply wrong here, because I typically don't care about visuals at all. I'm usually very easygoing on that stuff. So I found that to be particularly surprising, but I found some of the mission diversity in the terms of visuals to be lacking in certain instances. Now, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we move into the story for what it's worth for those of you who care. So pretty much what Neo is to Samurai Warriors, Wo Long is to Dynasty Warriors. I grew up with both these Warrior series, and as a kid, I loved them so much. My collection was full to the brim with all of these Warriors games, and they were definitely my guilty pleasure. So to see these characters that I grew up beating up thousands of enemies with be awesome boss fights, or actually be companions in missions, was really cool. Now, I know these aren't fictitious characters entirely. Obviously, they're a bit more of a dramatic flair attached to them. I know they are characters in true history, but ladies and gentlemen, it's much of what you saw in Neo, this dark fantasy take on, say, Nobunaga's ambition. Here in Neo, it's the dark fantasy take on what's going on with the three kingdoms of China. And it's interesting for what it is. I love the cutscene presentation when it's not having a bunch of hitches. And overall, it was enjoyable. It was fun. The English voice acting in particular, I got a good kick out of it. It's kind of that so bad it's good. But this isn't why you're going to be here. It's just kind of the conduit from one mission to the next. Wo Long Fallen Dynasty is a really easy recommendation for me. I think the game is otherwise fantastic as a new entry in a brand new series from Team Ninja. We really have our true competitor now to From Software, as they've made another banger here that I just keep going back to. It's so fun and satisfying to play, and because of its added RPG mechanics and its replayability, I just find myself gravitating to this one more than Sekiro. And so if you're like me and you were looking for something like Sekiro but had the RPG systems, then Wo Long's going to be right up your alley, especially with Game Pass and multiplayer in mind. This is a beautiful selection for a co-op night with your friends. It'll lead to some hilarious moments as you all struggle through bosses and levels together. It's a ton of fun, and honestly, even at $60, if you're looking for a fantastic Souls-like, this is it. Does it have some hang-ups? Certainly, and I've named them. Some of the bosses really did miss for me, as did the level design, but that wasn't enough to push me off this game, and I think you should definitely check it out. It is also a little bit more accessible once you get a hang of those deflect mechanics, but otherwise, definitely check this out no matter the platform you're on. Wo Long is legit. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, let me know your thoughts on Wo Long Fallen Dynasty in the comments down below. What do you think about this game? Are you planning on picking it up? Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thanks to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the heck out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.